This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hi, I'm Lee Bortons, and it's Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. Welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Kirsty Gilpin and I spend some time each week discussing with all kinds of interested people our new curriculum with classical conversations called the Math Map. And we're on summer schedule, and so it's a little bit different than during the year when we tackle things week by week. So over the summer, Kirsty has planned some really broad topics for us to discuss. And of course, we're here to answer your questions, so feel free to ask. Kirsty, what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm excited about today because I think we're going to answer some questions that a lot of people have had about sort of the bookends of the curriculum. We're going to talk about ex nihilo and seeing the unseen and how to work together. So I'm looking forward to that. But first, what questions are lingering out there? Does anybody have any questions? Everybody's just excited to talk about ex nihilo and seeing the unseen. And I realize I have been experimenting with the closed captioning, and it's only picking me up, not everybody else. So I apologize for that, that I hadn't turned that off. So I hope it's not too distracting.
I like it.
Or helpful for those that need it. All right, well, just like we ask all of our tutors to do, we're going to start with our math map, and the 4 levels that we do have available are the digits, the naturals, the fractions, and the complex. I did want to address, and maybe not for the people who are on the call and have been faithfully joining us and may feel like they know this already, but I really wanted to address this because we're getting questions from people asking us if we could make a printed version of the naturals or the fractions available. And we will. Just not yet, because what we have released digitally are not the final versions. We are still working on aligning our content really well. We're still working on editing. And so what we've given you is a little bit of a preview of what is to come, and it's not quite ready for printing yet. But soon, Lee and the rest of our team are working diligently to get those ready so that they will be printed and will be available. But so I appreciate the enthusiasm of all of you who have been asking, hey, can I get a printed version? At this point, no, it's up to you if you want to use those at home, because they are truly a beta, a preview version of the curriculum. We are in Imagine End Space this week, and we came up with that. I like to address the idea about the imagination, because I think a lot of times when we think of imagination, we think we mean make-believe, but there's a difference between imagination and make-believe, right? So me believing that there's a little fairy that sits on the corner of my computer screen and just flits around and touches everything with pixie dust, that would be make-believe, and it's really fun, but I'm pretty certain that that is not something that is real. It is just something that I came up with. All right, I'm making believe that it's true, even though it's not. Imagination instead means that we can actually use our brains and use our minds to see things that are maybe make believe, but also to see things that are true, and to see patterns and to catch a glimpse of things, even if they don't have a physical reality. And so we really want to use that to point to the idea that there mathematically could be an infinite number of dimensions. And we can look at the patterns that would help us to understand this infinite number of dimensions. It also can help, and so we use our imagination for that. We're also pointing to the idea of imaginary numbers. because we know imaginary numbers exist, right? We work with them. We know that they exist. We can put them on a piece of paper and talk about their location. But in our real world, we could never really measure an imaginary numbers, right? The real numbers are the numbers that we can measure and we can interact with and we can count in our everyday lives. Whereas the imaginary numbers are not something that show up in our everyday lives as a measure. So we can see them, right? We can talk about how we can communicate about imaginary numbers, even though they don't necessarily have something that's right there in front of us, a physical reality, right? So again, that idea of using our imagination and just contrasting that to the idea of make believe. So that's the unit that we're going to be talking about today. Does anybody have any general questions about that or about the domains that are currently available?
Yeah, somebody made a nice comment about your explanation, Kirsty. Thank you for that difference. And I think that's one of the things, it's the difference between a society that loves words, that they are more abstract thinkers and they can hold their thoughts longer about more difficult ideas. Um, if you stay only in the concrete, that's generally what we think children do, where they have to always have something physical in front of them. And so the imagination that we are helping to inculcate, I hope, is that our children can see the unseen, which is what Christ calls us to do. So it's an exercise through mathematics to help us believe what we can't measure.
Lee, I love that you reminded us of that, because I love that verse that says that Christ is the visible image of the unseen God, that he came because, like children, we do need that concrete, right? So he came to give us this concrete example that we could relate, so that we could get a glimpse of God through him. So I thank you for that reminder, that that's really our ultimate goal, is to help our children really catch a glimpse of God by exercising their imagination. So even though we're in ND, we're going to journey back for a minute to 0D and talk about lesson 1, ex nihilo. For those of you who have already received your booklet packages, or you've looked at the naturals packet and booklets, you might be wondering, what am I supposed to do with this? And although we never did this in our rooms at the Math Map, I heard Babs the other day say, this is really like your teacher's guide. And I loved that explanation of ex nihilo, because it really does give you this guide to the curriculum. If you look at the tops of the pages, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, it's going to tell you all about your curriculum. It's also going to be, it is our 0D lesson, our first lesson, so it is going to introduce you to 0D. But then the reason why I included it today is because it's also a preview of our Seeing the Unseen booklet in lesson 29. Then, and look at one page from ex nihilo. And here we're looking at just the top section of the page. And so I chose page 3, and it says here, the math map. And I'm going to read it in case you haven't seen this. The most important thing, remember, is to always read. So we're going to start off by reading, and it says the math map. It's page I-1, the front of the booklet. Track your progress on the math map for each lesson. Identify your past, present, and future understanding of a concept to decide how to study a subject in depth. Understanding is what is already known, provides a foundation for studying the unknown. Knowing what is next provides confidence. Much like marking the intersection of latitude and longitude lines on a map, place a check mark where this lesson's topic and your domain meet. Think about areas of improvement. Please continue. Dimension. Identify the dimension 0D in the blue chevron on the left side of the math map. Identify this lesson's math topic within the dimension, ex nihilo. Domain. Identify the domain you are studying this year in the top diagram. Look at the top right corner of this page to confirm the name of the domain being studied, naturals. The Math Maps blank grid also serves as a place for seminar notes. So there's a lot of information that we're including in those top sections. So if you were looking at the booklet and you came across that page that has the math map and you were wondering, why is this in every booklet? Or what am I supposed to go to do with this? I think that you just got a lot of really great information about ways that you can use that page. Every single page top is like that. So if you have opened up that Ex Nihilo booklet and you weren't really sure what to do, that's the first thing, is to read those sections at the top of each page. And then I would encourage you, while you're looking at that page top, to open up another booklet and actually look at that reference section. So you might end up opening up booklet 3 and looking at the math map in booklet 3 with what you just read in mind to understand how you would use that. Now, also in Ex Nihilo, we have charts that examine math from a classical perspective. So we're going to talk about the core habits, the common topics, and the canons of rhetoric. And what does that look like when we're using the math map? We're going to go through the pieces of the math map in greater detail in those charts. So between these page tops and those charts, especially the middle two, chart 2 and chart 3 for lesson 1, they're going to give you a really well understanding of how to use the. We have a video walkthrough of these page tops in the Math Map Companion for tutors and for parents. So if you want somebody to walk you through and actually compare the pages to these page tops, that's a great equipping that we have available for everybody there. Does anybody have any questions about those page tops and how they can help you understand the curriculum?
You said that that's available in the companion. Is that going to this booklet 1 and clicking, and then it'll walk you through the comparison with like another week?
It is for the tutors, it is with your tutor materials in Ex Nihilo. For the parent is, I will have to follow up with you because I can't remember where Melissa put it. But I'm pretty sure it's right on that. When you open it up, it's right home page is going to be a link to those videos that we think are going to be most helpful to parents who are starting.
I can put a link in the chat, Kirsty.
Thank you, Babs. I appreciate that. Babs is amazing. She's our link guru. So if ever I need to know where something is, Babs has the answer. And Shauna, I'm sure, does too. Babs just seems to like be lickety split. We're very fortunate to have both of them.
So someone's asking about putting the charts in page protectors. I wouldn't spend the money myself. I would just go ahead and put them in their own binder, because next year when you buy the next curriculum, you're going to have another whole set. So if a set gets damaged, you can just replace it. And the other thing is, if you put stuff in sheet protectors, you tend to protect the sheets. And remember, we're trying to help people learn to write in their math curriculum and make notes and circle things and put checks where you know stuff and X's where you still have to study. And so sheet protectors, even though they're great to make things non-consumable, which you might want to do for like some of the game pages or some of the pages you want your children to repeat. But in general, the charts, they're going to keep coming. There's lots of them, and you can always print one off later. You know, if for some reason you spill coffee on a page or something, you can print one off the digital or get it from someone in your community.
Do the charts come out easily, or are they bound in the booklets?
There are two. So the booklets are formatted so that when you open them up and lay them flat, there are two staples that hold the booklets together. And the middle spread of pages, the middle 4 pages, are the solutions. So you can pull those out. It is something that takes a little bit of dexterity. So we recommend that maybe parents want to help their students pull those out. Once you pull those solutions out, the next 4 pages of the chart, so those two can be pulled out. If you're careful, you can pull them out pretty easily. And Lee, thank you for that. I just love that idea that the charts, like we do with Bible study, where we make notes of things we want to remember, that those charts should be a resource that you're using, right? And highlighting and circling. And one of the things I think it makes a great way to keep track of, hey, what did we know last year? End of a week, I might go, these are some things that we did really well, and these are some things I want to revisit next year. So the next year I can look at that chart and I can keep a record for year on year of how I'm growing in my understanding of all those concepts on the chart.
Something that's kind of a fun analogy is I travel a lot and I have a huge wall map. And I like to put pins in the places I've been, and then a different color pin where family members have been. And so it's the same idea with this being a map, that we want the overview on I2 page with the, domains and the dimensions to be kind of your big map. But then if you had sections of each of the continents or countries, that's what the charts would be. So you want to make sure you're pinning that information too. Wouldn't you like it if the map could be on the wall as big as mine is? It's 13 by 8. I sometimes wish I could just make it 12 times that big so the countries would blow up and I could have put pins at each of the little cities. So think of the charts as doing that for you.
All right. Any other questions about these top sections and understanding the curriculum? So again, that's really a parent exercise. Your students that are in challenge are going to walk through that with their tutors so that they're becoming familiar. But it's really primarily a parent exercise to become familiar with the curriculum, in turn help your student.
I'd like to add here, Kirsty, is that, that's the first week. When the children came into classical conversations the first week, we don't expect them to have done a lot of work. It's summer and they are, doing their thing at home, and now they begin their CC year. And so the tutor that first day has 3 responsibilities. One, to show them what is this thing they have in their hands. So that's what the tops do for you. Then the next thing they want to do is, what's the goal for the year? And Kirsty's going to go over that in a minute. That's the bottom of these pages. But in between, we want to see a little bit of math calculations and math ideas that will connect it. Well, that's the middle of these pages. And so we've given tutors who maybe you start tutoring like 2 weeks before, you've licensed 2 weeks before we start. If you just go through this Ex Nihilo book carefully, you'll have all the training that you need. Everything else is just kind of icing on the cake and good ways to communicate with each other, because we love in-person training, but we have provided a written resource with this Ex Nihilo.
Yeah, and for those that are curious, the Ex Nihilo book actually came out of the pilot, and all of our pilot tutors who said, hey, all of this stuff that you're telling us, it'd be really great if it was in the booklet itself. And so we used to start with lesson 2, believe it or not, and we went back and added this Ex Nihilo book because the pilot tutors were the ones that really helped us to determine what needed to be in there and what would be helpful. So moving on to the middle section, this middle piece of the page here that says Ex Nihilo, think about nothing. This is here as an introduction to 0D. So it's going to help you answer questions like, what is 0D? Or what is nothing? What is 0? Or how do we talk about nothing? It is not intended to be a hard math lesson. There's not a lot of calculations, but it's intended to really start that conversation, both in community and at home, and encourage us to think about something that seems simple, but to think about it deeply. And so that's the purpose of this middle piece, is that introduction to 0D. And it's not intended to be really difficult. Some of the questions don't have easy answers because they're there to encourage us to start thinking deeply about simple things. Now let's talk about what's at the bottom here. And if you look at the bottom, you see there's a photograph. If any of you have been to Legoland in Florida, that is the Beetle Bounce in Florida. And it was my favorite thing to do there. They would go time after time after time after time, and just go up and down and up and down. But to the left of that, we have what somebody may have written. They may have included this photograph and then said, oh, look, there's 7 people. Or I can count by 2s to see 14 legs. Or look, there's a dad in the middle who looks like the origin, and there's 3 kids to the left and 3 kids to the right. That feels like a number line. Then down at the bottom, there's another question that points us again specifically to one of our charts in lesson 29. Guess where a scream on a park ride would fall in the decibel scale? So this is just an example of something that you might include in lesson 29, the seeing the unseen, because the goal of the curriculum, as Lee said a few minutes ago, is to help our families and our students to see the unseen, to discover God through mathematics. And so a lot of the times we experience things with our senses, and then we look a little bit farther, right? What's behind that, or what else could that look like? And so that's where we're looking at this, right? Maybe with our senses, we heard the screams, but our imagination is now to take that a step farther and say, well, how does that compare to other sounds, right? Or we look at this picture of this arrangement of children and we go, well, that looks like a number. It's us using our imagination to take something real and connect it to something that is, right? I'm not seeing a number line, but because of my imagination, I can see the connection and I can see how this is like an example of a number line. Now, our goal is to see beauty and goodness, and that's our goal for our transcendental students, especially, is to really, when they're talking about seeing the unseen, is that they're really taking that and saying, okay, what is true? What is beautiful? What is good? Our younger students were on the journey to getting there. So we want to talk about truth, beauty, and goodness, but we also want to just encourage them to see beyond the scene, to see the math in the world around them, or to see how God might be revealing himself through that. So our charts in lesson 1 are going to introduce those ideas of truth, beauty, and goodness and how they might relate to mathematics. And then we have these examples that we want you to use alongside lesson 29, seeing the unseen. So before I ask you if there's questions, let's go ahead and take a look at that booklet. So lesson 29, seeing the unseen, is truly a blank book. And so that's why I put as an inset there a blank page. It is just a blank book. There are charts in the middle, but there are no solutions because there is not a right answer for this book. The goal is that students are going to fill that blank book with artifacts and reminders of how they saw God, right? How did they discover truth, beauty, and goodness? We hope that eventually families are going to start on lesson 1, and as they see God throughout the year, they're going to start filling this booklet up. We know from experience that some families, some students may wait till closer to the end of the year to start filling up their booklet, because then we're going to be developing that habit over the course of several years. Our charts for lesson 29 emphasize discovering math with our senses. So as I talked about that, right, we're talking about how we experience the world with our senses, but we want to look a little bit deeper. What's the math behind those things, or how do those things point us to God? And so those charts in lesson 29 specifically address some of the questions we can ask to see the unseen, and then how might we experience math through our sight, our hearing, our taste, our smell, and our touch. Things get a little bit fun as you look at those charts. And again, some examples are back in, right, this bottom piece here. So if you haven't looked at lesson 29 in the blank booklet, this bottom piece might feel out of place, but we wanted it to be here to remind everybody to be starting to collect those artifacts to put in this booklet. So they really do go hand in hand with one another. And I'm also going to point out that the goal is that this is a book for your slate, it is not intended to be a beautiful presentation of that a mom has helped put together. It is not a Faces of History project. It is not a science fair project. this is like a journal, right? It's their journal, your student's journal of how they've seen God in math. So for your littlest students, it might just be some colored pictures. You might have something that they said and you write it down in there, but it's a journal for how you've seen math throughout the year. So who has questions or wants to share a testimony perhaps about that?
I'll share. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think I might have seen Ex Nihilo at the end of May, and I was looking, and we were studying Genesis and talking about the Abraham's descendants are going to be like the number of stars and sand. And so I started thinking about the infinite number, or I mean, obviously there's a finite number, and maybe that's like 10 to the 25th amount of sand and stars or something. But would that be something that would go in this journal?
That would be a perfect thing to include in this. Yes.
So one thing, sorry if I steal your thunder, Kirsty, I don't know if you're talking about this or not, but when I put this together and with Kirsty, we designed it so that we introduced it in that week 1, like she said, but we've got in the challenge tutors guide that week 15, that the last week of the first semester, there to show the students what they've been putting in their unseen booklet to give them a second example. So you have these 16 pages that Kirsty's going over as examples, and then your tutor would give examples, because we totally get that a child probably doesn't see the unseen right away. It's going to take some time. And so if those first couple of years you find you aren't doing much until the second semester, or your child isn't, it's okay. This truly is their booklet. And one of the things I want to encourage you guys to do is to save them, because now that my boys are all approaching 40, it's really fun to go back and say, and I can see this happening with the math map, but in some of their years in challenge, the materials that I collected with them, I can look at it and say, see, this is the year you were growing and got nothing done. And see, this is the year you got real excited about school, right? And so like it reminds me of their enjoyment, and then the hard years too, and the things the Lord has brought us through without ever even writing any of that in that curriculum. Or into that journal. It's just a good remembrance for us, because as we become grandparents, we want to also encourage our children to be wiser than they really are, and to remind them of what they've been through and how they succeeded, and that their kids will be okay. But they just have to go at it. And so that's just another way to think of this book. And then it's different than, say, a blue book, where yes, an adult is doing some assessment. And so you've got 2 different resources throughout our Classical Conversations curriculum, one for your child's benefit at first and your benefit, and then a nice memoria for when they're older.
Lee, I love your reminder that this is another way to assess what's happening with your student, especially when it comes to math. I think we can be really tempted. I want to test, and I want to know what you can do, and I want to know how many facts you know, or how fast you can complete a drill sheet. I want to know if you can solve this equation, right? We tend to think in more absolutes when it comes to math assessment, and it's a little bit harder to assess how our child has maybe grown spiritually through mathematics. And this is an opportunity to capture that and to be encouraged and excited. I know that our tutors who have piloted this, they have shared just these beautiful conversations that come up in their classes, where students who maybe aren't mastering the math quite yet in terms of being able to compute quickly, but they're seeing the unseen and seeing beautiful things. I don't know if there's anybody on our call today that would like to share that, or master students. They actually create a booklet similar to this at the end of our first master's course for the math concentration. And it's really amazing and beautiful to see what people say. So I don't know if there's anybody who's would like to share either what they've seen, similar to what Kristen did, or conversations from our pilot tutors that they've overheard their students having.
And Bab sent a wonderful link of what some real students have put into their booklets. So
I remember one student in particular, he was a drawer for sure. And so he did like to draw the world, but when it came to writing papers, right, that was something he disliked. But this was one of his shining moments because he loved to draw. And so he was able to really, he wanted to start this earlier. A lot of students waited until the week before, they were going to bring it into community. But this particular student spent a lot of time, and because he enjoyed it, he enjoyed writing, that he was able to use the skill that he loved to incorporate that into math. And so that's one of the things I put in his progress report, where we tell parents, how they shine. And that was one thing that I noticed, that he really came out of his shell during that time because it was something he enjoyed to do. And then he could still learn through it. Right.
Yeah, my kids like to keep, commonplace, they call them commonplace books or whatever. Like they save their favorite quotes, or they or even their science journals. Like it becomes this thing that they're excited about, and they're looking for things to put in. And I'm so excited about the potential of this for math as well, because my kids haven't been that way with math, but they do like to draw. And I just see the potential of them being like, oh, I can add this to my book that's now becoming this piece of artwork, or just a keepsake, like you were saying, Lee, that they can be excited about and look forward to adding to. And I feel like there's so much benefit in having this.
I think it's great too that in those examples you posted, there's some cut out and pasted in items, because this craft challenged mother here with some children who are craft challenged, while we, dig in and we work on our stuff, it just helps to see that, hey, that's another option, and especially something they can grow from. That was one of the reasons we joined CC, because someone would at least be giving my children art lessons each week. So I appreciate seeing that.
the other thing you can use this book for is if you have a timid parent in math or a timid child, to tell them, look, go ahead and just do the tracing and matching and copying on, say, page 7 this week in your actual booklet, and then copy something from that page into your seeing the unseen. And that might be it's all the hand-to-eye coordination practice they need for those little guys. But just there's so many uses for this as a record of what they have been interested in choosing to look at versus what we want them to look at.
I love what, and I'm sorry that I didn't see who was talking, but the mom that just talked about how she loved the fact that in CC your kids were going to get some art instruction. And that just reminded me, right, that when our younger ones are doing oils and foundations, they may go, oh, look, mom, look how this connects to what I'm doing in math. And so there's another whole way of filling your unseen booklet is, where did you see integrations with other strands, right? Where did you encounter math where it was unexpected, right? So maybe not just in your math work, oh, I saw this, but maybe you were somewhere else and you went, whoa, there's math here. And so that integration or that intersection is another thing that you could put in the Seeing the Unseen booklet.
I know for me as a master student that went, as a master student who went through it, there were two things that really hit me. One, everybody did it differently in our class. There were no two that ever looked alike. I'm sure through the years, like even so, like with your students, none of them are going to look alike, even year to year. And then for me, the takeaway is I'm sitting right now outside in between two buildings, and all I can do is see the math, and I see it, and it's just, it doesn't go away from me. It's like I want to create another one just so I can keep doing it, or create a journal or whatever. I'm not organized enough to do that, but it's just something that it's a project, but it's a project that never ends, at least in my mind. It's not going to end. I'm always going to be thinking that way now.
That's great.
Thanks, Donna. That's perfect. That there is no right answer. And I was just going to point out that if you didn't hear Bab say this, There are some students that are going to love this, like Jana, your kids, right? We keep commonplace booklets and zip books. And so we've got the habit of keeping these records. Some kids that do this at the end of the year, perhaps in 29, and that's okay. That hopefully over time they may be inspired to start earlier and to start keeping that record. But we want this to be a celebration and not something onerous. And so I really want to encourage that this stay that way, right? That this is just celebrating where you've seen math. It is not the one more thing that you have to do. Just reminding you all that, right? So as I said about, at the beginning, next year, notice that we'll have digits, integers, and fractions will be printed along with complex and monomials. So that's a year from now that all of those printed levels will be available. 2 years from now, we'll have all the levels through binomials will be printed and available. So for those of you who are anxiously awaiting that, it is coming. And really, if you were to compare how quickly we've gotten the math map from our first conversation to you in print form, it's gone much more quickly. Projects like this would normally go. So the Lord has been gracious in moving things along pretty quickly, even though it may not waiting end. So I want to remind you all that today is the 5th. It is my understanding is that this is the last day that the math map will be available in the 2023-2024 academic year. What that means is that starting tomorrow, you must be enrolled and have paid your tuition in order to access it for the 24-25 academic year. So we just want to continue getting that word out for everybody to understand where the availability for the companion is. Does anybody have any questions about the release schedule or the materials and their availability?
Someone asked about the charts in 15 and 30. It's going to be up to you when and how you remove your charts. Like I can see some parent just taking all 30 of them the first week you get the curriculum and putting it in your own binder. And I can see those of you also just doing it week by week. The charts aren't, they're kind of a really wonderful cheat sheet for the older children and just more of a guide for the parents of the younger children. So whether 15 and 30 are in the booklets or not, it's irrelevant. It's up to you.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to find your students see those charts as helpful on their blue book. Those are really more for a reference for the parents and the tutors in how to assess both the actual what kinds of problems do I write to some long-term assessment. The one thing that is in lesson 30 that may be a reference that your students will want to use before they get there, especially the older students, is one-page reference to all the functions of the math map that includes its parent equation, its graph, its derivative, its integral, and its reflection across the y equals x line, which in some cases is also the inverse. So it's a one-page sort of reference to those functions that is probably maybe something that some of your older students will want to use before they get to lesson 30, but it's included in a lesson 30 as this summative piece to help understand how all those pieces fit together.
Something I wanted to point out is, right now it's kind of exciting to go through the Ex Nihilo books the first time you're seeing it. It's way too much information. Remember that you're not going to get all of it the first year. And that's why, again, the next year, there it is again, and it's in the curriculum you purchase. And so now you'll have even better questions. And then maybe the third year, you're starting to say to your child, yeah, I don't remember where that is. Go get your Ex Nihilo book and look it up. Like you'll start to realize how to use it, and it'll transfer from you as a parent to your students as they get older, using it as a tool. And then when everybody's super familiar after 4 or 5 years of doing the math map with how everything is laid out, and they've made bunch of seeing the unseen booklets, and they've taken blue books and on and on. I really hope that when the new one comes, you don't throw it away, that instead you throw it into your car and say, I'm going to give this to my friend who keeps wondering about homeschooling, to show her the kind of things we talk about in math that are different than what a school would talk about, right? That there's always somebody who you can encourage to know God and make God known through mathematics. So I hope it becomes kind of a little missionary tool.
Lee, I remember hearing this many years ago at a practicum, and you can tell me if this is true or not. But I remember somebody saying that our learning goes in cycles, that our first year through, we're really in the grammar stage. The next year, we're starting to make connections between some of those grammar pegs. And our third year, we're starting to feel rhetorical and be able to explain things. And then the fourth year, we cycle back and we start acquiring new grammar. And we go back into the grammar stage. And so that's one of the reasons why we keep going through these 3-year cycles, because every time we end up back on that fourth year, we sort of somehow end up back in that grammar stage and we're picking up new things. So I don't know how accurate that is, but that's a memory from a practicum a few years back.
Yeah, so you guys can connect that to like your own Bible study. So if I memorize a longer part of scripture, like, many passages, 3 years later, if I haven't been practicing it, I got to go back and do it again. So that first year or two, I kind of hang on to it. And it's just how your memory works. If something is larger than, and this is why the timeline is designed the way it is, if it's something larger than 5 to 7 bytes, your brain actually starts to file it away and keeps those short things towards the front. So it's just human nature to have to review. So we are designing our curriculum with lots of review.
And then we always want to remind you that there's lots of opportunities for lots of ways that we can support you. And I remember just in those early days of talking with Lee, that just one of the things that was really on her heart at the time was wanting to be able to support CC families with good material that would help them to love math, through math, to love God more. And so that's why so much time invested in providing, equipping, not just for your tutors, but also for families. And that's being housed in the companion, and it's going to be developed over several years. But really, we want you to know that their support is there for you. So that does include the companion. There's a lot of detail in there. You do not have to use the companion to be successful with the curriculum. And so we keep saying that because we want people to know the intention is not for you to be living online while you're trying to homeschool your children, that the curriculum itself was designed to be self-contained. That's why the charts are in each booklet, so that if you are headed to the beach or to the hospital to visit somebody or wherever you're going, that you can take that booklet and you have your solutions and your charts and you have examples. And so you can apply your classical skills of learning with those booklets and do really, really well. The companion is there for those times when you want to dive a little bit deeper, when you as a parent goes, well, okay, well, what is this? I don't remember that. I want to know a little bit more. That's what the companion is. We really want to encourage you that the intention is not that you live in the companion every day, that it is there as a resource for you, but that those booklets really are intended to be self-sufficient. Then we have our forums, and we have, so Babs, am I correct in saying that there's a Challenge A Parents Forum, a Foundations Parents Forum, and an Essentials Parents Forum in addition to the tutors?
Yes, there's a forum for everybody in the world.
So if you guys, Shauna and Babs both kind of wave wave so that people who maybe don't know you can put the face with the people that are ably answering your questions. So if you email the math map at cc.com, or if you're on those forums and getting answers, Babs and Shauna are the experts behind that. And they are just an incredible blessing to us. And they have a wealth of knowledge and understanding about the math map, but about classical education, about other CC resources. Babs has been a tutor for a couple of years with us, so she knows the math from a tutor's perspective as well as a parent's perspective. Shauna has been a product sales specialist and an AR and probably lots of other things. Shauna seems to have done lots of things. So she brings a wealth of knowledge about CC and the classical method. So between them, they really are doing an amazing job. And so if you have questions or you know somebody that has questions, please tell them, go jump on the forums. They may find their answers are already there, or they can ask them and they'll get them an answer, or to use the email and let us reach back out. Obviously, invite your friends to our book club, use the archive. And then as we're rolling out the math map, one of the beautiful things is being able to be doing the same math concept as all of your friends. And so being able to have those conversations in community, at the playground, as you're living, right? That those things that we were just talking about showing up in that Seeing the Unseen booklet can also show up in your conversations as you're doing. So, does anybody have questions about about the support that's available? Or where to find it?
You're all
Sort of.
getting it. Go ahead, Gianna, what were you going to say?
I was going to say this is sort of in that category of question, but and I should already know this, but this morning my kids, we all sat down and we just got the math map out and just looked at it. We're going to go through it this summer, the complex. I have college students that are home for the summer, and we're going to just do it as a family. And it was really fun this morning. But when we were talking, I was just having them look at the math map page and what do you see? And so we're like talking about the dimensions and the domains. And when we got to the n dimensions and fourth dimensions, and they were calling it fake and this and that. And I told them about the terms MARP and GARP, and I was trying to think of the other one, and they were like, no way. And anyhow, I wanted to look up those terms, and I wondered if there's like an index somewhere that I finally found it, because logically it would be where you start talking about fourth dimension in the charts. I did find it, but is there a searchable index? Or
if you go to the glossary is going to be your best resource.
Okay. It'll tell you which week.
Yeah. So for example, if you looked up MARP and GARP in the glossary, it will tell you to look on chart 23.1, as well as giving you a definition and where appropriate, an image or the symbols. So that is going to act as your index, as well as. So.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
You tell them if they're at all entrepreneurial, they can decide what the words are called in fifth dimension, because no mathematician's done that yet, and they can go patent or trademark them. And then if someone wants to use them, they can make royalties.
Yeah.
I already you mentioned that in a call one time. So I already said, Lee said that fifth dimension measurements, they aren't named yet. So go for it. I think the guy that named MARP and GARP, his last name was Bowers. So they might get us confused.
Maybe he's a long lost uncle. So are there any other questions that you guys would like to have answered today on any topic? This brings our first run through of the dimensions to an end. Not the book club, but just this first run through. So next week we will be back in 0D, and we are planning to talk more about the quadrivium and what what are the arts of the quadrivium? What does the quadrivium look like? Remember, goal K through 12, we're still using those terms just because that's what we're familiar with. But foundations through challenge are primary and secondary education. Goal is the trivium, right? Our goal is to teach the trivium, the arts of the grammar, dialectic, and the rhetoric, which emphasize language and the skills or the tools of learning. That is our goal for our students in this season of life. Because historically, that's what the trivium was about. And then students would go, the advanced students would go off and continue their studies in the quadrivium. So the trivium was preparing them for those studies in the quadrivium. So our goal is the language of mathematics. Our goal is to be using math to teach those arts of the quadrivium, the grammar, the dialectic, and the understanding, those skills or tools of learning. Those are our goals. But we know that in mathematics, we are pointing our students towards the quadrivium. We are equipping them with the grammar and the language they will need to succeed in studies of the quadrivium. So we're going to, through our next go through of the dimensions, we're going to talk about how those intersect with the quadrivium and what that looks like. What is it that we're pointing our students toward and preparing them for? So as we wrap up this first go round of our dimensions, are there questions from any of the dimensions or any of the booklets, any lingering questions that you have?
I have a specific question about a math problem. Is
Okay.
now
Sure, this is perfect.
great. So this week 2, page 11, right about the middle of the left-hand side.
All right, give me one minute to open up booklet 2
Is this
and get to
complex
page
that you're
11.
asking about?
This is complex, yes.
Okay.
It says write the equivalent decimal digits. And I see one is base 10 and one is base 3, but I don't know. I don't know. I see the answer key, but I don't know where those numbers came from.
So you have stumbled upon one of the places where everything that was supposed to be given to you was deleted except the form of the equation.
Oh,
So if
good.
you look at our errata sheet, it tells you what the numbers are that you're supposed to compare to. So thank you, Nicole, for letting everybody know that I made a big mistake. And it's done 4 times in that booklet.
Well, Lee, I'm so thankful that you made one because I've made several going through this, but I'm glad to know I wasn't just incapable. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, Kirsty, I don't know where the errata sheet is. Is it even out yet? I think it's coming soon.
It should be coming soon. Yes.
Yeah, please, any kind of errata, let us know. Sometimes you might be wrong, but most of the time I'm wrong. So I want to know so I can correct it.
I just wanted to say how thankful I am for this time that you guys are giving to answer these questions. As I work through the complex and learn, I've learned so much math and my kids have already learned math. Having a place to be able to go to say, I don't understand is such a blessing in my teaching and my own learning. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for bringing your questions because our conversation is best when you guys ask us things, contribute.
I had a question about what you just mentioned starting over next week. So I came in not even in the middle, like probably just the last several weeks, and I got the curriculum, the complex. I don't have any children that are in Challenge A yet, but I wanted for myself to go through it. So I just wanted to ask if next week, if what I understood correctly, we're you're starting at the beginning of the curriculum. And so if I was to work this week in that first week, is that what I'm understanding we would be discussing? Or I would like to go ahead and start doing it since I got so late into it.
Well, yes. So for the summer, what we decided, so for those who have not been here since the beginning, this is our now third time curriculum. The first time through the curriculum, we went 1 week at a time, and we emphasized spending time on the covers. So if you're looking for some ideas for your exordia, or what does this conversation maybe look like at home, that first edition of the book club is probably going to be a great resource for you. We also pulled out some key ideas from each week and talked about what are some of the big math ideas of each week in that first go round. Our second time through the curriculum started this past January and finished in April. And we did 2 weeks a week and used the first 4 pages of the naturals. And so we simply went through those first 4 pages. We talked not even about the whole page, but sort of what was one of the big ideas on the page, discussing what our natural students might, the tracing and so forth. But then if we're looking at those pages with older students, how can we start bringing in some of our common topic questions to explore those pages? So even though they seemed like they were very easy pages, we were trying to look through how could we look at this with all of our students, these same pages. Then this time through, we went by dimension. Over the summer, we're going by dimension. And we tried to answer some of the really big questions that we've gotten from people. And we've kind of lumped those by dimension, and that's what we've done for this 6 weeks. So we're going to go through by dimension again for the next 6 weeks, and that's where we're going to be looking at those dimensions and how they tie into the quadrivium and some of the ideas in the quadrivium that may be represented there. So certainly as we're working through that, you can bring questions in and you'll see how they intersect, but we'll probably be going through it much more quickly than you will, since we'll be doing whole chunks at a time. And then I'm not sure where that takes us to. That probably takes us to getting ready to start the school year. And so I think at that point, we will probably go back to our once per week format, so that families who are then working through the school year, those parents who want to jump on our book club or watch the book club each week will have the opportunity to be a little bit more in sync with their students. So does that help answer your question about what to expect?
Yes, thanks so much.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we are about out of time, but thank you all for being here. And I'm excited for our next 6 weeks and talking about the quadrivium and what it is that students do. So please come back for that.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kirsty.
So much.